This is something I've thought about. What I've been thinking about for a long time is I can't tell if I'm like an advocate of the religious viewpoint or its worst possible critic. Because that's another thing that I think interferes with our relationship with a collection of books like the Bible, is that you're called upon to believe things that no one can believe. And that's no good, because that's a form of lie as far as I can tell. And then you have to scrap the whole thing, because in principle the whole thing's about truth. And if you have to start your pursuit of truth by swallowing a bunch of lies, then how in the world are you going to get anywhere with that?
Because they claim that the Quran, say, or the Bible for that matter, is the literal word of God. But more than that, they claim that their understanding of that word is correct, which means they conflate two things. Like, because you could imagine a situation where you had a book, and I'm not saying this is the case, it's an imaginative exercise, where you had a book that had all the answers, that was extraordinarily complicated. And so that when you read it, it wouldn't be obvious that you understood it, or perhaps it wouldn't be obvious that you didn't understand it either, but you can't get an uninterpreted version of the book. And so the fundamentalist claim is far worse. It's that not only is there an absolute reality, truth, embedded in the book, but that their particular take on that absolute reality is the absolute take on that book.
I get comments on many of my videos from Christians who are like, we don't like Jordan Peterson because he's like playing himself off as a Christian, but he believes in evolution.
And if you're on the fundamentalist side, you say, well, we'll try to shoehorn science into this framework, and really that doesn't work very well. It doesn't work very well with the claims of evolution, for example. In fact, it works very badly. And that's a problem, because evolutionary theory is like, it's a killer theory. And like, it's not a complete theory, and there's lots of things we don't know about evolution, but, trying to hand wave that away, that's not going to work without dispensing with most of biology.
He explicitly says being gay is not like an illness, so it doesn't need a cure, and that's just not the right way to go about things at all.
If someone's saying, well, I'll cure you of your homosexuality, it's like, well, it's not a disease, first of all, and so it doesn't need a cure, and probably you can't do that anyways, and it's not the proper way to advertise clinical services, let's say, because that isn't really how a clinical relationship works. It's got to be the case that the hope, so to speak, of the more enlightened conservative types who were willing to open the door to gay marriage was that by bringing those relationships inside the traditional fold, that things would normalize, right?
Yeah.
And that there would be a promotion of something like stable, mature, responsible, long-term monogamy.
So in my mind, I view it like Tucker Carlson on Fox News. Tucker Carlson got the Republican neocon party to stop being so pro-war. And I think Peterson, when he's on the Daily Wire and he's talking about evolution and all this different stuff, I think he's going to sow strong division amongst the hardcore fundamentalists and the more, cultural Christians or whatever, which is what I would fall into. And I think that's a very good thing.
Well, I think he had an opportunity to do that, but I think that he's chosen not to. I think that he's instead chosen to share a stage with crazy Christian fundamentalists at CPAC or whatever, and make excuses for them and hang out with them and sort of enable their political rhetoric and their political agenda. Like, show me where he's interested in pushing back against these sorts of people.
I agree that he did not calling out Michael Knowles or Matt Walsh for their rhetoric around like we need to eradicate transgenderism. It's like, dude, that is literally the same rhetoric as eradicate whiteness. And if you're Peterson would rail against people who say eradicate whiteness.
Yes, he would.
And yet he just was like, well, but he's, these are my colleagues or whatever. So I agree.
Yeah. He knows what side he's Peterson on.
That's true. And he also basically rolled over when he interviewed Benjamin Netanyahu, which I was not happy about. Oh. I think Peterson, the Daily Wire and Benjamin Netanyahu is obviously tied up with each other. So I thought that was kind of lame. So there's many things that he does wrong, but I do think over time, you can't sweep that divide under the rug. I mean, this is like a sort of a central thing in Peterson's philosophy. It's like, if there's tension between two sides in a relationship, in a business partnership, whatever, that tension will grow unless it's resolved. Anything that is conflict delayed is conflict multiplied.
But I did learn that conflict avoided is conflict delayed and magnified.
The point is, maybe there is no conflict, right? And that's why I was sort of saying this, like in the conflict between sort of religious fundamentalism being illiberal and, religion being an inherent force of good in society and the life of the individual, I feel like he's pushed far more of his chips into the latter camp than the former these days, because he's understood that, like, in order for him to make a living and a career as a sort of right-wing political thought leader, he has to be kind of cool with religion, whether that's, evangelical Christianity or the kind of sort of extremist Jewish politics that is going on in Israel right now. Or I'm sure, like, in time, he'll probably be making excuses for Muslim fundamentalism as well. I understand that's very hot with some of the right-wingers now.
He has a growing Muslim audience, according to him.
See, there you go, right? And so in that kind of situation, there's no market incentive for him to start whipping out his greatest hits of why fundamentalism is bad. It's
interesting. I'm hearing the conflict between the lens that you are looking at this through and the lens I'm looking at it through. You are approaching this from a more, even the words you used, market oriented. There's no market incentive to do this.
Yeah.
And it's like, I don't think that Peterson's incentives are as simple as market oriented, like I'm trying to grow my audience or whatever. I think he's genuinely trying to pursue truth, which is why he does it poorly. Like I said, he does it very poorly by not addressing the fundamentalism on the right as much as he should, I believe. But like, if he's pro-gay marriage, he cannot get along with Matt Walsh inevitably. At a certain point, Matt Walsh will have to make a video or have to say something like, we can't, Jordan Peterson's nice and all, but like, he's pro-gay marriage, so he's not on our side. Like, Matt Walsh has to say that. Otherwise, Matt Walsh isn't a good fundamentalist.
Well, I mean, it depends if Jordan Peterson ever chooses to bring up his support for gay marriage in any context ever, right? If he chooses to be strategically silent over time, for the rest of his life,
I don't think you can do that. You cannot. I don't think that can happen because
the way it would happen is that Matt Walsh would get in trouble for expressing some draconian view, and then a bunch of left-wing people would get pissed off at him for expressing that sort of homophobic view,
right?
And then Jordan Peterson would not frame it on the merits of what Matt Walsh was saying. He would frame it as, oh, the woke mob is coming for Matt Walsh, and isn't this typical? And I will stand by Matt Walsh because he's a victim of cancel culture, blah, 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 blah. You see this all the time with a lot of sort of Republicans who might be, sort of privately secular, privately socially liberal. But, in order to keep their audience, they never frame it about like, well, what is the substance of the thing that this guy is getting, quote unquote, canceled for? It's always just framed as like, well, here comes the left again, right? So it's much more about like who's doing the attacking.
Well, exactly. And to your point, when Jordan Peterson talked to Matt Walsh, he brought up Michael Knowles talking about eradicating transgenderism, and he didn't condemn it. So he had an opportunity right there to say, hey guys, you're getting this is how he would say it. Hey guys, you're getting a little heavy on the genocidal rhetoric, and the ideology and whatnot. And it's like, he didn't take that opportunity. And I think he's going to pay for that. I think this is my complete speculation. He's kind of a friendly guy, Jordan Peterson, behind scenes. I think he says repeatedly he's very high in agreeableness. So he doesn't like conflict and all that. And I believe him. He is failing to live up to his own principles of conflict delayed is conflict multiplied. Here's a perfect example, and I swear to God, I would pay a lot of money to ask Matt Walsh this question. Jordan Peterson has said that the book of Revelation is literally a psychedelic account.
I think that Revelation is a psychedelic account, literally.
Oh, the book of Revelation.
I really believe that. You bet. I think that the author of that had a psychedelic experience, and all he did was write down what happened to him.
Okay, that is blasphemy in the technical sense. If the moral foundation, if everything Matt Walsh does rests upon him being a Catholic, and his coworker down the hall is committing official blasphemy, that simply won't jive over time. Inevitably, that will cause conflict. And I am hoping to incite that conflict as much as I can do. That's what I told you. So I'm doing this stuff.
No, I know.
But for real, I would love to know, Matt Walsh, like, your entire moral authority is derived from your Catholic faith, and yet Jordan Peterson is committing blasphemy right next to you. Do you not think that it's important to call him out at least? And then what would happen there? Either one of them have to change. I know, I would too. That's what I'm saying.
I would love to see it. But the problem is that
I'll just say this real quick. I think Jordan Peterson, compared to Matt Walsh, has stronger strength of character because he's been a clinical psychologist. If it's between Jordan Peterson and Matt Walsh who's going to compromise on their fundamental values, it's Matt Walsh, not Jordan Peterson.